when you're having this comparison and that feeling of judgment or envy or gossip, it's because you're up-leveling. That place can be very lonely, but when you actually end up manifesting the thing you made the sacrifices for, it is going to be so worth it. From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Expanded. Jessica here. We have another really powerful how-to episodes. We've had how-to episodes around how to see manifestation results, how to navigate tests, how to see when our inner child's running the show. And this one's going to be really powerful as well. And I think it's actually really timely because we're moving into Gemini season, which we get to see different versions of ourselves and kind of explore those pieces. And so this month, we're really diving into the energetics of how to spot your own blocks and insecurity by looking at the places that you gossip, judge, or speak about others. And so really what we have the opportunity to come up on against here is where are those places where we're gossiping, we're passing judgment. Maybe we think we're just stating information about someone, but because we have a bit of a non-neutral perspective on it, that is a judgment or a gossip or talking shit or being a mean girl, or maybe it's really, really subtle where we think we're just repeating a fact that happened, but because we're repeating it to someone behind their back, then that actually is a bit more under the gossip realm. And what's really cool about this topic is that it is such a cool tool to be able to utilize along manifestation, because where we are talking about other people is a direct correlation with where we need to look at ourselves even further and deeper, and it will connect with the manifestation you are currently calling in. I know last episode I talked about a lot of rock bottoms people are facing, a lot of fork in the road moments, needing to define a new version of themselves, step into a new version of themselves, really face painful emotions that might be coming up. I know there's been a lot of horrific things that have been going on in the world in general right now. So I think one thing that we can take from all of that is, okay, where can we start to self-soothe ourselves so we can show up as the best version on the other side? And one of those ways we can start to navigate that is by looking at this little subsect of gossip. Where are we doing it and what wounds is it hitting on? So we can start to integrate those, whether it's through inner child or through shadow, which we're going to dive in deep on the episode of how to be able to tell from the two. But it's a really powerful way to integrate further and to show up as a more authentic versions of ourselves. It's also really exciting because in 2 weeks, we are launching into our Unblocking Challenge, where we're going to take one of our deep core wounds, something that keeps coming up again and again and again through different manifestations, through dynamics in life. Hint, 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 where you are gossiping about others may be hinting to your core wound, and really take inventory of that. And then we have 5 brand new DIs that you guys are going to get to utilize to help really unblock in a deep, concentrated way. We partnered with Janelle Nelson, EMDR, and licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as Dr. Tara, our neuroscience and psychology advisor. And we really up-leveled the process of these deep imagining. So it's kind of cool that this all is aligning at the same time when we're really made to ask in a global sense to look at those places we need to integrate further, both on an individual level and on a macro level. So stay tuned for the challenge. You'll probably want a pen and paper to take notes from this episode because there is a lot of good takeaway. We have our checklist in the show notes. So if you want to refer back to that, be sure to do so. And share this episode with anyone that you think might benefit from a gentle nudge of looking at what places they can heal and connect with their manifestation further after gossiping. Now on to the episode. We had a really good quote on our Instagram the other week. Gossiping is just another form of projecting your insecurities and finding temporary relief from your own shame. So this is such a powerful tool that we can really utilize when looking to unblock further and get closer to our manifestations. Lacy, what's your quick hit or quick tip thinking about this topic as it relates to manifestation?
Well, it's really interesting. We have so much to get into, which is really exciting. I had a little bit of channeling coming through about it this morning. And these are thoughts I've had for a while, but I was just getting a little bit more specific. And one thing that is so obvious, if you're gossiping, it's directly showing you how you're blocked. Done. And we all do it. Every one of us does it. And I would guess that many of us are doing it for some sort of a relief, whether it's a bonding connection or it's a form of, feeling better about a boundary we haven't set yet that we know we need to, or if it's manipulative to connect with somebody, sort of that bonding piece again. But something that I think is really interesting in the energetics of manifestation is if you're gossiping, then the block is tied to the dynamic you have with the person you're gossiping about. So that's a really big piece. And I think we're going to end up sort of segueing off in two different directions here: shadow work and inner child work, or unblocking work. That's what I call all of it. But, I really pair unblocking work with inner child work. And so when you're gossiping, usually you can look at these two things, these two different directions to see, where do I need to point my direction to actually take this energy and use it to unblock? So usually if you're gossiping and you take a moment to take awareness and you're like, oh, wow, the trigger here that's going on is actually the dynamic I have with this person. Less about what I'm saying about them, but much more about how they affect me, how I'm affecting them, our dance with each other. That usually stems down to inner child work or unblocking work. However, another segment of gossiping is if I'm gossiping because I'm feeling envy about a situation, or I just really want to spill the beans about a situation, that usually is tied to shadow work, because there's usually, I think all of them have shame at the root or some form of activation and trigger, but that in particular is usually a form of shadow. So we'll get deeper into what all of that means throughout this episode, but that's definitely a key piece. When gossiping comes up, note that we all do it. Every one of us does it, but we're usually doing it to seek relief or bond. And through that, we can really start to take some awareness and go, oh, hey, I had nothing that I needed to unblock today. Okay, maybe I actually did. I was gossiping today. Let me take a look at what I was saying and where it was coming from. And if at the root, it was coming from the fact that I have this dynamic that feels really uncomfortable with this person that I'm talking about. It could be something as simple as the way you feel about a celebrity. There's something about them that triggers you, the way, some could say this about the Kardashians, right? If that comes up, it's maybe it's the way that they look, the plastic surgery, the way they live their car. There's a shadow there. That's something to look at. However, if maybe you were gossiping earlier about your sister and something she does that really annoys you and makes you upset, and we can kind of call this talking shit. That's another version. I think a lot of us, millennials, can relate to talking shit. I think anybody can. But usually that's showing you a dynamic, a very specific dynamic. And that dynamic you would really look at and take through inner child work. So we have shadow, inner child. So let's get into this.
Yes. I think that's a really helpful distinction because I think so many times that version where it does need to be that inner child healing, people will try to take that through shadow and try to own and integrate those pieces. And I think that can be helpful for a lot of different ways. But if it's that inner child wound, it's not actually that item. And I kind of have an example that might explain this a little bit more clearly too. So we did a poll in our Mighty Networks group for anyone going through judgment or gossip to share some of those tips and what they are gossiping about and how it related to their inner child. And stay tuned for future episodes. We're going to pull in Mighty Networks as well. That's our community group. But someone had written in that they were really triggered by how this one person parties. They're drinking all the time and it really, really bothers them when this one person parties. And they tried to take partying through their shadow, but they weren't quite finding like that core hit wound. And they realized they looked at other friends who party and they're not judgmental of it. So it's not the partying that they were judgmental of. It was the particular person. And so in that instance, it's less of shadow for partying. It's more, what does that person represent? What wound do they hit on that they need to go through the inner child for?
And I want to say something quick on this. That was a great example that sometimes the wound isn't obvious. If you listen to our last how-to episode, is your inner child running the show, or how to tell when your inner child's running the show? And when you get down there, we had this distinction of finding the core essence of the wound. Sometimes it's a little mysterious. What about that person is triggering you? In your example, it's not the partying. It's not some shame or some repressed energy inside of me about partying. It's actually what this person represents with the partying. And it could be something as simple as like how free they are. Or maybe it's something that they're using that partying to distract themselves from something, to numb. So maybe that roots down to when your parents would numb out and they wouldn't meet your needs. I think that's why I love these how-to episodes, is it can really start to show how you have to do a little bit of digging and a little bit of estimating and feeling into, what is that wound? Because that wound is crying out for you to integrate it, to unblock, especially in ratio to your manifestation, because our whole goal here is to arrive at full, worthy, authentic self that we were when we were born. So just note when you have gossiping coming up or judgment, they're just the most beautiful invitations to take unblocking deeper, because it's going to ultimately make you a much more magnetic person. Another tiny thing that I just want to touch on, if you were fully integrated on a subject, and integrated meaning that the wound has been completely desensitized and you don't have any triggers surrounding this wound anymore, or alternatively, if we're going into shadow, right? I was talking about a wound, so that's inner child unblocking. If we're going into shadow, so something about what you're gossiping about or judging, that's shadow-based, like something you put into your shadow because when you were young, you either witnessed or experienced judgment on it. And so you said, oh my gosh, if I'm like that, I won't be loved. So I'm going to disassociate from this, put it in my shadow, and I'm going to look at that as bad because that means hurt, pain, and no love in my subconscious. So if you were fully integrated, meaning that you desensitized the unblocking, the wound, the inner child thing, and now you have no activation around that. Or if you have integrated the shadow, meaning you addressed it in unblocked shadow, or in the daily practice, you brought it out of your shadow, you've reintegrated it with yourself. If you were fully integrated on a subject, you wouldn't be gossiping or judging, you would feel compassion, period. And that's something we all need to realize. If we have judgment, which we all do, about a subject, or we're gossiping about it, there isn't integration. There's an opportunity there. And this goes even as deep as culturally, or when we're looking at, people we can't truly understand the acts that they do or what they're up to. There's an opportunity there to integrate and to unblock or to integrate your shadow. So just note that if you were fully integrated on a subject, you wouldn't be gossiping or judging. You would feel compassion. That's integration.
That is such a good distinction. One thing I wanted to quickly touch on, just because I thought it was interesting and we're covering the topic of gossiping, just breaking down a little bit of the history and sort of the science behind gossiping and what's going on there. And Elise Lunan, our podcast guest, we'll link our episode with her, had a great etymology about the word gossip on her Instagram where she broke it down. And basically, the word gossip used to mean godparent. It was closeness, friendship. It really helped people for evolutionary purposes. When primates lived in small groups, they needed to know things like who might be a threat, who was a potentially good mate, who was a bad one, who would reproduce more children. And so they learned through personal experience. For those who were able to gossip and share that information, they were able to survive longer. And those who just learned through personal experience would have been slower, and it could have led to potential danger. So it's in our evolutionary biology to gossip and share information in order to help survive. However, we're at a time where most of the gossip we're talking about is not really helping us survive. But what they did also find in a few studies was that when you gossip, your brain releases oxytocin, which is like our feel-good hormone that's released after sex. It reduces stress, anxiety. It's like the trust hormone. So we're creating a partnership and bond when we're gossiping with someone else through this being released in our brain. And one of the interesting studies showed that whether people were gossiping for like malintent and they were just kind of complaining about someone, or they were gossiping to vent, either way, it was releasing oxytocin in the brain. So what I kind of distill from all of that, and this is my own sort of perception and looking at it from an outside viewpoint, but it seems like our brain does enjoy gossip. We get sort of this oxytocin hit when we are gossiping. But if we are continuing to gossip about the same subject, all we're doing is kind of looking for that quick hit of connection, reducing stress, anxiety, etc. We're not fixing the core root. And by doing inner child work and shadow work and peeling back what we're gossiping about, we can start to get to that core root so we don't have the same pattern of gossip repeat over and over again.
The same dynamic popping up.
Exactly.
I would even go so far as someone who has never studied this, but just from an energetic, manifestation standpoint, I would even go so far as suggesting that oxytocin being released is two things are trying to be achieved here. Relief from whatever anxiety, trigger, manipulation, uncomfortability that you're feeling, but also deeper like bonding, trying to feel like you are safe, seen, protected. And so if we look at it from that standpoint, like we look at anything in manifestation, the only true way to ever truly feel safe, whole, worthy is to actually address, like you're saying, what's beneath it, period. That will actually give ultimate relief. And not only that, but it'll give ultimate confidence, and it'll give licensing and empowerment to fully live and be yourself and not be sidetracked by these exterior triggers to which you're trying to find some sort of connection and relief from. So that's such fascinating science and history. Also, from the etymology, you also found that shifted, which that was so fascinating when you were talking about that.
Yeah, so it originally was about this closeness, about the evolutionary purposes, but they found around like the 14 or 1500, it became a negative term because it implied that it was friendship among women. So you think about like witch hunts and witch trials, demonizing of women's wisdom, their gossip is something that you shouldn't share. So around that time, they started to turn gossip into this negative word, this word they shouldn't do, because it seemed like male shadow was arising. And they were afraid of women sharing information and potentially being, more powerful in the society than the men were.
Not only are you like becoming more magnetic, you're also breaking generational cycles and traumas, especially the one of being programmed. Like who hasn't in society had some sort of the programming from media, culturally, anything that women are catty and gossip, So it's like breaking that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because at least for me, like societally, when I hear gossip, I think of women. I don't think of men at all.
100%.
And men do it all the time as well, just in a different form.
Completely.
One thing that I'm curious about is, especially relating to manifestation, it's almost like, do you feel that you need to gossip around certain subjects as it relates to the manifestation you're calling in? I've noticed something around the timing of the desire to gossip on certain subjects because it really does have so much to do with whatever is being called in.
I think this is kind of typical for anything we're manifesting, right? Then the universe starts testing us with it to be like, are you sure? Are you sure you grew your self-worth here? Like for me, for instance, and we talked a lot about this in our magnetic meetup. Collectively, we're kind of working on similar things, mine being my needs matter and boundary work. You were sharing at the magnetic meetup that you're working on something very similar to manifest this perfect wedding venue, not people pleasing, et cetera. And so the moment for me that I'm doing this massive DI microdosing EMDR work around my needs matter and boundary work, even psychic, subtle boundary work, like we talk about in our workshop, really doing the subconscious work before speaking, the actions, et cetera. So it's interesting that the moment I start doing that the universe starts going, are you sure? You sure you integrated this? Is your trust muscle strong enough here to not divert back to old patterning and behaviors? That's where we've talked about in the test episode that tests are not only opportunities, they're energetic as well. And so that's what this falls into, And so for me, what the universe will often do when I start doing all of this upgrading boundary work and my needs matter work in the DIs in this process is the universe will be like, okay, cool. Because for me, security and control mean everything because I had to do that growing up. Be in control and secure at all of these different houses and caretakers, et cetera, so that I'm always safe and happy and people pleasing. And so the universe knows that security is like my Achilles heel. And so it'll take the things that I feel are my biggest senses of securities and it'll test me with them, but in the guise of boundary work. And what's happening there is the universe is literally pushing you against your edge because you're so close to a manifestation and it's watching to see, did you really integrate? Did you really up level? Is your worth higher or are you going to go back into those old dynamics? And it's exactly the exact same thing happens when we're manifesting something physical, like a partner or a new house or an apartment. The universe will take your Achilles heel, your core wound, and let's say you're manifesting a new apartment and you've done all of this work and you haven't been settling and you've been passing the test. When you're getting really close, especially in that magic dark facility area orbit, the universe is going to start going, are you sure? Because you're running out of money. Are you sure? Or like, et cetera. It's going to pull on those things. So I think this is something really important to talk about in ratio to this more subtle unblocking when you're manifesting. And I won't say subtle because it's actually, I think it's not subtle. It's hard. It's big, when you're looking at these wounds and these shadows and you're really integrating them and going through all of the emotional work and clearing around it. But it's the exact same thing. You're just going to be tested in those now. So I don't know if you want to share what you're currently manifesting, but a great example is that's how you're being tested right now.
Yeah, so I'm calling in my dream wedding venue that Daniel and I wrote our manifestation list for that aligns with everything that feels really authentic to us. And the biggest thing, one of my Achilles heels, is people pleasing and codependency. And so I'm finding all these ways where I would have just agreed or said okay in the past, and I'm having to set firm boundaries and really root down to like, wait, what do I want from this situation instead of just going with what I can tell other people want. And so I'm getting tested multiple different ways, from my landlord to family or friends having events or baby showers or something, and having to be like, wait, okay, I know I feel I should do these things, but what do I truly want to do deep down?
And do you find that any gossiping or venting or judgment, talking badly about others is coming up during this process?
Actually, this is a great time to kind of ask this question, because where I find the gossip is about the people that I have a hard time setting a boundary around.
Yeah. That's like I talked about in the beginning. For you, that's coming from a core wound place. You're like finding relief, right? You're like, I don't actually know how to talk directly to this person and say exactly what I want to say to their face, etc., because of old core wounds that you feel, that's not safe or that's scary or that you can't put your needs first. So you go and gossip about it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting distinction because I think when we think of gossip, we're thinking like, oh, we're talking shit about someone that did something wrong and we're kind of in this catty energy. But sometimes our brain almost like tricks us to think that we're valid in the gossip because our feelings feel hurt from the situation. For example, like in the situation where my needs felt crossed, I was like, this person is asking for way too much in this situation. And I feel entitled to share about this to other friends because this feels utterly absurd and ridiculous for them to ask this of me. And instead of saying like, oh yeah, I'm valid for feeling this way because this is an absurd thing, the fact that I even see it as absurd and have that non-neutral, non-compassionate reaction is my inner child needing healing in that instance.
1,000%. I mean, just to make a distinction, there's obviously a wide spectrum of gossiping and judging. Obviously, you have like mean girl gossiping, and that's just shouting out even louder. So it's just like, it's a cry out for how much one is needing to feel secure and safe and like they belong. It's such a bright light of like, I need to really, really work with my inner child here. However, your example is a little bit more common. It's very common. And we all go through that. I go through that all of the time. And, especially as somebody who it's very hard for me to communicate my boundaries directly, I often find myself talking to everybody else about it because I don't have that healing and that integration to just speak directly and compassionately to the person. So that's such a wonderful example of, oh no, that's some inner child stuff going on there. And most often than not, when we are talking to others about an issue that's coming up, we're not seeing it with complete compassion to the point where it's almost like we don't even need others' inputs. That's integration at that point. But when we are doing that, most often than not, the dynamic is really, really putting pressure on such a big core wound. You're like, oh, I don't feel good in this. I need to go vent and talk to other people or et cetera. So I think that highlights what a lot of people are feeling and going through. And my take when I'm conscious enough or like I've had enough sleep is, wait, maybe this time I won't go to this friend and chat about it. Maybe I'll just take this straight up to a DI, or maybe I'll take this straight up through my process. And if that doesn't feel like it really, really got it, maybe I'm just going to take this right through the boundary workshop, because for me, that would be the core wound that it'd be hitting on right now.
I put together this one checklist to really help people spot when their gossip is shadow or inner child work that needs healing or where they can use that to unblock and really identify and like, okay, am I coming at this viewpoint or situation with compassion or is this really gossip that I can unblock further? So is it difficult to see this person or situation neutrally without an emotional reaction? Does this person or situation have anything in common with people that you have dealt with in your past or situations you've dealt with in your past? So that's another clue of like, oh, do they remind you of someone that you dealt with energetically from your past, whether it's a parent, a sibling, someone you went to school with? Are you defensive, judgmental, placing blame or triggered, or making fun of someone else? Are you afraid the rug will be pulled out from under you or something will be taken away from you from this person or situation? So oftentimes, I saw this a lot in the Mighty Networks group of examples where people said how mad they were at their boss for certain situations. And part of the root of that is they feel the power dynamic. Oh, they might lose their job. So are you afraid they're going to take something from you? And are you getting a need met in this situation, such as being seen, heard, accepted, or soothed by others when you share gossip about this person or subject?
I think this checklist is spot on. Spot on. I wonder too, if we're able to add one question or distinction, how do you know when one is inner child versus shadow? And I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the top, so that you know what direction to go to. So essentially, if one is dynamic based, so what you're gossiping about or judging or venting about or making fun of, it's actually a dynamic, a relationship. That's inner child work. However, when it's something that you're just straight up judging, you have disdainment about it, or it's ridiculous to you, it's the mean girl, etc., that's shadow work.
So then once you see, okay, for sure, this is gossip, now deciphering whether or not this is gossip based off of inner child wounding or shadow wounding, if it is this energetic around this particular person is familiar, inner child, if you're judging what the action really is or what someone's doing or wearing or saying, and it applies to anyone that does that action item, then shadow.
100%.
This is so helpful. What about when someone, and I notice this a lot in the wellness community, when people are calling out and notice other people's blocks? Is that they are witnessing an inner child shadow or wounding of their own, and not in a compassionate way, but
give me an example.
Okay, so this is actually a personal judgment or gossip, so I'm adding my shadow on this one.
She's adding this in her manifestation journal right now of what to work on.
So someone was sharing about this friend that they just met, and they said, yes, but this person, has all of the things on the surface, like successful business and whatever, but they really limit themselves when they eat. They really don't eat a lot of food. They have all these rules and regulations around food. And I said to them, I was like, oh, it sounds like they're not in abundance or comfort with eating, that seems sort of like a block for them or something that they feel in lack of or not safe in. When I was sharing what this person's block was about this friend that we knew, it wasn't in a neutral sort of way. It was in a, I need to be careful around this person. And then in that instance, for me, because I have body image issues and had, eating disorders when I was in high school and all of that stuff, that to me was a like, oh, I still have maybe wounding around that area. So someone who's actively dealing with that maybe is not a good person to have around. And although I felt empathy for them because I have definitely been there in my life before, there was a small element of, oh, yeah, I see what that person's going through. And it's almost like my wall came up of, ooh, I just need to be careful spending time around them. So there was empathy, but it was also not full compassion because I had been in that situation and I thought it might be triggering to physically be around someone who's active in that scenario.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think you just totally highlighted the entire process. You're doing essentially what the primates used to do. But because how our brains have evolved, we realize that our objective here is pure consciousness, oneness. We're all connected. Even when people do really, really bad things, it comes from their wounds. Wounded people wound other people. So ultimate integration is being able to have compassion for them. It's interesting because you were doing what the primates used to do, like it was out of safety and your own evolution. It wasn't from like a totally mean girl, shadowy place, but you also followed that up with saying, oh, it wasn't completely neutral. It wasn't me going like, oh, I can see what's going on there and this is why. And I've been there and I totally understand you. It was still a sense of like, we're different. I want to be safe. I might be better. And that means there's a wound. There's a wound there because that person to you represents not safety, not being safe. And so you just answered it in real time. If this is happening, not in the wellness community, it happens everywhere. If it's happening ever and it's not fully neutral, compassionate, you ultimately will know if you're neutral and compassionate on a situation. It's not something you can force and you shouldn't force it. That's just spiritual bypass. It's an opportunity to go, I still have some work there. Cool. I want to be the most magnetic person I can possibly be. So I'm going to take a look at that.
I think that's so helpful because It's that weird nuance where you almost trick yourself like, oh no, this isn't shadow because I'm just witnessing that. But it's like if I was in full, complete compassion for this person, I wouldn't feel the need to distance myself.
No, that's not healed. Yeah.
Right.
You wouldn't feel afraid. There's still that level of like, I'm not totally safe and integrated on this subject yet. And that's a beautiful barometer to know, and to also not judge yourself and go, oh, okay, I still have residual stuff here that's not desensitized totally and safe. So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Now, what about when people are calling in an emotionally available partner and they notice, oh, that person's emotionally unavailable? How would they be able, I guess the checklist, to discern whether that is their inner child shadow wounding because they're noticing the unavailability, or whether it's a complete test and boundary because they want to call in something that has that?
Well, number one, if anybody's coming in still that isn't emotionally available, it means it's not healed. So there's that piece, and that's how it's all connected in manifestation. Like, that's just a test and going, okay, well, the universe is still serving me this. So there's still some work to do. This is actually a really, really good distinction. If the universe starts to serve this stuff to you and you go, are you joking, universe? Like, what? Are you kidding? That was like 2 years ago. I can't believe you would give me such an easy test. That's integration. And back to this example of emotionally unavailable. But if you have that reaction, again, don't fake this with yourself. That's spiritual bypass. It's old manifestation rhetoric. Doesn't work. But if you have this feeling, the thing comes and you're like, oh man, universe, that's so much of my list and it's so close to what I want and they're not emotionally available, that they're still wounding. It's literally energetically that different. If you have totally healed on the subject, you've integrated on the subject, it would be laughable, and not judging the person laughable in your manifestation practice. Like, are you kidding, universe? You would even try this on me? Like, I would never fall for this. Are you joking? I'm so far beyond that. I love and respect myself so much now that I wouldn't settle for somebody who doesn't love and respect me the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the piece where you're saying, I love and respect myself that I wouldn't settle for anyone in this way. You're not then looking at that person and be like, haha, I'm better than you because I wouldn't do that. You're saying this is just not aligned from a neutral, compassionate stance.
Oh, yeah. Like, I'll encounter often, in fact, because I was somebody who would call in emotionally unavailable people. I went through that. And once that was done, like, that's not even a possibility in my life ever again, literally. Like, there's a particular person in the canyon who's so obviously emotionally unavailable, but seems to date everybody. And it's fascinating looking at the people that I have so many people in common that will find interest in this person. And I'm not judging them. I'm just like, oh man, you guys are both so far away from feeling like that level of security in yourself that you wouldn't desire this person who's using dating and sex and multiple partners to fill a void. I see, I'm like, this is so obvious, but still the people that are attracted to this person, it's not so obvious because they have that wound still. So they're trauma puzzle pieces. But when I look at this person, when I'm around this person in the canyon, I'm not sitting there looking at this person being like, you're the devil. Oh my God, you're such a bad, I don't have that because I'm so integrated. I look and all I can see, oh, your inner child needs a lot of hugs, right? Like you need a lot of things right now. It's pure compassion because I'm like, you're such a good person in so many ways, but you're still playing it so safe. You're still going after the addiction as opposed to healing to get the whole picture. So that's, I guess I hope that helps as a distinction.
That definitely helps because I think people can see this like, oh, am I just judging them by crossing them out of my list? But it's like, no, you're witnessing with compassion that other person.
Oh, totally. And, knowing when these tests pop up and that if you're having complete anger and judgment and stuff at them, great, feel it, but take it to your DI because there's a wound there. The universe is showing you so clearly you still are blocked there. And this is a really good way to find the missing piece of why you haven't connected with this particular manifestation because you still have unblocking to do around it. So instead of being upset with the universe or like, this person, it's like, well, that type of person's coming around because your inner child still has some stuff to work out around that.
Okay, let's jump into some examples that'll help distill this down even more too. So someone wrote in what they were recently judging was people with money that don't understand how, quote, the rest of us live. So this person is calling in financial wealth through her work as a novelist. She recently gossiped about a dear friend who's come into their own financial wealth and that this friend didn't understand, quote, how the rest of us lived. This person witnessed in childhood, they grew up in a family that was poor, and that poor was considered noble. They made do with what they had, damaged cars, secondhand clothing, off-brand items, an off-brand trapper keeper, which they felt was the worst.
You can tell, like shadow, when you're thinking of your shadow, when you think of that stuff, you're like, the worst. That was because having that was so shameful. It wasn't cool like the others. I wasn't lovable and accepted. So that's like so beautiful to even, hear that in real time. That's somebody's shadow literally expressing.
They also said, my parents both worked hard to provide for us, but neither of them valued their worth and always undercharged for the work they did in their business. When my father began working for a very financially wealthy family, there was a lot of tension because they were quite demanding of my father. So our family narrative around that was that they acted that way because they were rich. So basically the belief she's projecting out, which is why she's having difficulty manifesting the financial wealth, is that you're more lovable if you're poor or it's noble to be poor.
This one's really great because it's complex and it goes to show why one who really wants to manifest, if the piece that, the three things that have to be, the trifecta has to be emotion, unblocking, expanding, and aligned action. They all have to be in worth to manifest your thing. Here's the key. Number one, the family wound. So what we're talking about, if we were really to break down in a DI and get to the family core wound, is that both parents didn't feel worthy or lovable in who they were enough to charge or have their needs met. Whatever programming the parents received in childhood, it was that your needs aren't as important as other people, even could have gotten the messaging other people above you, whether it's societally, socially, it can be culturally, there's many ways that can show up in our society. And this is how you really, really unbreak systemic imprintation, in my opinion. So that's the core wound here. Second piece, the shadow. So when you grow up around that messaging with your parents that we're not worthy or lovable enough to get our needs met, your parents are imprinting that on you through what they do. But you then see the repercussions of that through society, the shame that'll come up. how that presents is not having the nice things, or maybe they're around other people who had nice things and they didn't. Obviously, that's the case because of who the parents worked for. They saw that. So that develops the shadow. Oh my gosh, if I'm poor or I have off-brand or I have etc., then I'm not lovable. So that's how you create the shadow. That creates the judgment. Money's bad because it hurt my parents. It hurt us. Those two pieces have to be unblocked. And then the third thing here that I can see very, very clearly is this person isn't fully expanded. So getting back to that trifecta, all three things have to be in worth to manifest. Your wounds have to be in worth and healed. Your expansion has to be in worth. If they can have it, I can too. And then the aligned action, passing tests, etc., has to be in worth. I can tell that the unblocking isn't in this because we just pointed out the wound and the shadow. Now, the clue in what she's saying is my friend recently just came into money or their own financial wealth and doesn't understand how the rest of us live. That's the major clue if I were in session with this person to go, oh, your inner child and your conscious mind, right? We've talked about that in our last inner child episode. I can tell that both her inner child still isn't expanded. So her inner child has still never seen to believe that having money is good and that it's positive and it creates freedom and it creates ultimate resources to create change in the world if you want. Like that's what an abundant person feels, especially inner child abundance. And I can tell that her conscious mind hasn't been expanded in this yet because she's saying, recently came into financial wealth, but doesn't understand how the rest of us live. The rest of us, the commoners. I don't know, like what is the rest of us, right? Because, people have very different, not only definitions of wealth, but also success levels. They vary. So I can tell that not only is the unblocked trifecta piece not in worth because of the shadow and the inner child wound, also the expansion isn't there. So I don't know what she's up to on the level of passing test or taking aligned action, but I can guarantee you this manifestation's not coming in until those other two things are in worth.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is not everyone connects the dots. When they're gossiping about their friends saying, oh, they don't understand how the rest of us live, and they're calling in financial wealth, to me, I'm like, of course, connected. But I think when you're actually going through it, people have a hard time saying, okay, this feeling that's coming up that this person doesn't understand how the rest of us live, which to me sounds like they don't understand how I lived with my family. They don't understand how hard it was, how painful it was, and how much I want this money and I don't feel like I can have it with ease like this friend is having it. And they just don't understand that. I don't feel understood. Seeing that, okay, this feeling is coming up, this trigger is coming up, this test is coming up, it is directly related to what you are calling in. So try to see every piece of gossip, trigger, test as your route to the universe wanting to connect you with your manifestation and wanting you to heal all the beliefs that stand in the way.
Yes, 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 yes. If there's one thing to hammer home in this episode and every episode is everything that's happening in your life right now is a mirror and it's directly connected to what you're calling in, because whether you called it in consciously or unconsciously, the universe goes, cool, okay, I'm going to start doing the work to make this happen. So the whirlwind, if you're like reading energy, the whirlwind around you, the things around you, the orbit around you is all directly the universe going like, okay, I'm working with you here. It's like a video game. It's like, I'm working with you here, teammate. Okay, cool. In order to get that, I'm going to have to pass the ball to this. Can you work through that? And that's literally like the inner child core wound. So it's basically in real time, the universe has situated this person in this example around a friend who has just recently come into success. The universe isn't just doing that. The universe is like, okay, I'm putting you in the orbit with this person because they're here to expand you. That's like the trigger or the annoyance we're feeling about that friend having some success. It's reflecting as a mirror, literally in real time. The universe has put them in your life to reflect back. And, it's our job to kind of put like our manifestation goggles on and go, whew, I'm feeling triggered by this. Because X, Y, and Z, it's like to become our own reader, our own healer, our own coach in a way. And so it really is a gift. And the universe is so specific. The matrix, the universe, God, it's so specifically here to help. And that's exactly what it's doing. And that's what neural manifestation is trying to just teach everybody, is how to read your own energetics. And then bam, you have this place you can go, like a gym, to work it all out and go, okay, cool, universe. I hear what you're saying. I get it. I'm going to go do my piece. I'm going to go do what's within my control. It's a blueprint of how to work that out.
Love that. Okay, so this person is calling in a partner to have kids with someday. What they recently gossiped about was their ex. They broke up with their boyfriend of 2 years last October and found out that he's met someone new within 3 to 4 weeks of their breakup. They have plans to move in together at his parents' place and start a family soon. She puts a lot of exclamation marks after that and writes, whatever that means. So you can tell she's definitely not happy with it.
Been there.
My biggest judgment is that he just wanted someone to blend into his life and give up their life to live his way. So I judge this new woman. However, I also judge him because one of the reasons I broke up with him is that his words about the future, get a house, have kids together, were in line with what I wanted, but his actions by living on a boat, living with his parents, buying a van again, instead of investing the money in a house we could have together, canceling my deposit on a dog that we could own together, did not align. So I judge him for replacing me with the same problem in the same pattern as before. And there's a big feeling of winning. When I look what he's done, because I've done a bunch of inward looking, meditating, changing my patterning, and he is just repeating a pattern. This whole competitive thing goes back to being a twin and thinking everything's a competition. If you lose, you're stupid, bad, unworthy, whole other topic, but it creeps in everywhere. And then I judge myself because at the end of the day, I still miss him. And there's a part of me that thinks we could get back together and make it work if we solve these problems. So what they witnessed in childhood was from their mom and dad's relationship. Mom stayed at home, dad worked, and was able to go on any trip he wanted to, while mom always felt trapped, like she couldn't. They're still together, love each other very much, but I think I learned that being a stay-home mom was being in prison. And I feel like I want to be a mother, but I'm not willing to be a full stay-at-home mom. And a man wouldn't want me to not be a stay-at-home mom. And then they feel like they also learned that winning equals survival. And then they wrote, phew, lots of stuff here.
We all have lots of stuff. That's the beautiful thing about being human and having the human experience. So there are a couple of layers here, but I love the recognition of already knowing quite a few of her patterns based on the twin stuff and being able to connect those dots. That already shows that there is a lot of awareness and a lot of deep divings happened. It just sounds like a lot of unblocking. But what I intuit, like if I were working with this person, I would actually see a little bit deeper, and then I'll connect this back, that we all know, just as she knows, like the ex is just recreating the same situation again with this new person. Nothing's changed. He's already moving this person into his parents' house. Sounds like he did something similar before. He's obviously very much like not ready for commitment and seriousness to take care of others. He has a lot of wounding there, you can tell. What I'm hearing, she has that longing, like she loved this person. She would love to obviously make it work. That's very much, you can hear the undertones of, man, why couldn't it work? And I can relate to that because I was in a similar relationship before in a very similar dynamic. But I think the real piece here, the real wound, is that she was very much tied to her twin. Like your twin, you just are no matter what. Like it's even sentient. Like we have actual scientific research on how sentient it is. Psychically, you're connected. That I think here, you always have your other person. She's kind of like that crab who's gone from a small shell. She's in between with no shell, going to the bigger shell. That's what happens when we're upgrading. And I can tell she's upgrading because she's doing work and she has awareness. And she was somebody who her whole life was always in another shell with someone else. And so the real piece here that's hard and tricky is the no shell until the big shell comes. And so it's interesting here that her biggest wound, even more than the competitiveness, that's obvious. She's going to start working through that and unblocking. But the biggest wound here, like the gossiping, the judging, the everything, is actually going to be becoming so extremely whole and comforted in no shell, no safety, no other person as my safety net, even if it wasn't a positive experience with her twin. That's her whole reflection that's happening here, is becoming totally whole without anybody else holding space in her aura. That's like the big piece here. And how that can be applicable to other people listening, people who grew up enmeshed, like you were super enmeshed with your parent, the people who have been in monogamous after monogamous after monogamous relationship. Those are the people who are in a very similar dynamic where they have to become very, very strong and comfortable, totally alone without anybody else informing their safety and energy. That's like her big self-worth, huge move here to become extremely magnetic.
What I'm also hearing too is like, okay, if the core wound is that she doesn't feel safe in between shells, she always needs to be attached, whether that's with the twin or with a partner that she knows isn't aligned, that in between space feels really unsafe. Okay, so if that feels really unsafe, someone who is immediately reattaching, which is what part of her does want to reattach immediately, like she's calling in a partner. So her recent ex reattaching to someone new, that's super triggering because that's what she wants to do. But as she's up leveling, she knows she can't do it with someone like that. So she's gossiping and mad and activated about someone who's doing that because part of her is like, hey, why do you get this when I have to sit here in this uncomfortable no-shell situation and you get to go have these things that you want in life without doing any of this work? And the universe is saying through showing them that this person is finding the partner is, yes, this is what you want, but ground down into your own self-worth and you don't have to settle for all the things that that partner was giving her. I mean, they clearly didn't align. Like she went through the checklist that he wasn't showing her with her actions, that he was really committed and wanted the future together. So he's not the manifestation. He's not the person. It's almost like a dangly carrot situation of like, maybe I wanted that. No, you have to get grounded in the uncomfortable transitional piece as you're discovering your worth.
Yeah, and I'll be a little bit of an expander here, and I'll say this compassionately, in fact, because that's how I feel about the situation. But even in my prior relationship, I went through a very, very, very similar situation, very similar dynamic. And I say this so compassionately because I know partners that he's like currently dating or have recently dated, and he feels it. He's like, I don't know how I manifest these women that are, he calls us sober goddesses, but I don't want to have children or be in a committed, deep marriage situation. And I mean, he has a lot of childhood stuff that definitely points to why, unresolved, why he wouldn't. But, you know, just to give expansion in the situation, he's still, even like 10 years later, not 10, 7, like still in the same dynamic over and over and over again. And I think that's probably really painful for both parties involved. So that's just an expansion piece in this. I think everything you said is very accurate, Jessica, like a really good way to look at it from an unblocking perspective. And I think something I just want to say kind of as a side caveat to this, it is so often that when this can happen in like family dynamics. It can happen in, like we're seeing here, in dating dynamics or relationship dynamics, or it can happen also with opportunity material things like apartments, where it's like, man, I had to get my heart broken, or I had to leave the situation because it didn't meet all of my wants and needs as what I'm manifesting. Say this is an apartment, but we can take this exact example. And then all of a sudden, your roommate who you were in your last apartment with, they automatically manifest somewhat seeming of a decent new roommate to be in that apartment, and you're stuck back at home, or you're stuck living at your aunt's until you find the next place. This is actually a different situation I know of. what's happening there when you're feeling this way, where you're like, what? Why the fuck do they get the things all of a sudden? And I'm here having to be in it, in the depths, in the ditch, doing the deep digging. It's because you're up leveling to something really big and good and in alignment with your soul. And it doesn't mean that the other people aren't or aren't going to. It just means they aren't right now. They aren't unblocking and making the shifts or realigning their lives yet. They're not ready for it. It's just not the choice they're making yet, spiritually, consciously, karmically, whatever. And that's fine. They're right where they're supposed to be. Just know when you're having this comparison and that feeling of judgment or envy or gossip or really hurt, it's really just pain and hurt. It's because you're up leveling, and that place can be very lonely. It can be hard. It can be so painful. But when you actually end up manifesting the thing you set out for, that you made the sacrifices, like you left the old stuff and you made all of these sacrifices for, it is going to be so worth it. And I think that's something that both Jessica and I can sit here and say. I can say from a relationship standpoint, from a fertility standpoint, from a house's standpoint, from career, not making it as an actress standpoint. Like, I can say it so wholeheartedly. I think a lot of people can be in the space, might be in the space, might be listening, and that might be hitting home a little, but it is so worth it to be that crab between the shells.
So worth it. And that pain point, that hurt, will go away and transform into something new because you will have healed. You're clinging to the past version of yourself. So lots of hope on the other side.
Last thing I want to say on the gossip train is oftentimes I can find myself when I can hear someone else having a hard time with somebody, I can be like, oh, fuck that, for fun. Like, I say it for fun. I'm saying it. I don't care about the person they're talking about. I have no judgment or feeling. In fact, the me in this moment in time even goes like, oh, I compassionately understand what that person's going through. I do it to comfort the person in front of me and to relate. And that's also something that's very much a people-pleasing codependency thing that I'm working on currently, because the magnetism on the other side of that is, even though my initial reaction is going to be that, as a very empathic person, as a psychic person, also as a child of an alcoholic, you're always trying to make somebody else feel comfortable and safe in an environment. You can read everything they're feeling, everything they're going through. But part of this work I'm going through, like My Needs Matter boundaries, is actually being able to just be in space with somebody and hold space with them without relating in those kind of old connection mechanisms. And that is really, really hard to unwire, but I can see like it's starting to happen. And even though there's like even an awkward pause in between, and like the old ways that I relate to people, and I still catch myself doing it, but that's also something to look out for, because the wound there for me, obviously, is, oh no, if my needs matter and boundaries, and I'm really making this shift into more magnetism, I have to also be able to hold space and be in that space really uncomfortably, not using my old techniques. That's another part of non-enmeshment and non-codependency and non-people pleasing.
Such a good example. I definitely do that, where I can tell someone is feeling down in the dumps, upset about whatever situation. And to make them feel better, I'll gas them up. You like get them excited. You're like, no, like, screw that. You deserve this. How could that person do that to you? I don't have any feelings or emotions towards that other person. I'm purely responding on, I want to make this person feel better in the moment. And I know that will help do that. But ultimately, it doesn't allow them space to process their own feelings and shadow and inner child about what's happening. And I'm people pleasing. So.
Completely. So yeah, something else to look out for in your process when anyone's working through this. That's another angle.
So good. Okay, so let's recap our checklist. How to spot when gossip is shadow, Is it difficult to see this person or situation neutrally without an emotional reaction? Does this person or situation have anything in common with people you have dealt with in your past? Are you defensive, judgmental, making fun of, placing blame, or triggered? Are you afraid the rug will be pulled out from under you or something will be taken away from you with this person or situation? And are you getting a need met, such as being seen, heard, accepted, soothed by others when you're sharing gossip about this person or subject? Then, once you determine that this is gossip, then ask, is it a dynamic-based gossip where it's about a specific person or an energetic around a dynamic that's come up in the past? That's going to point you to inner child work. Or is it disdain? You're just judging and gossiping almost in a mean girl sense about a particular item or thing or trait that could apply to multiple different people. That's going to lead you to shadow work.
Agreed. Love it.
And then for anyone who's doing the Mighty Network who submitted for, to have your example shared on the episode, and for anyone at home listening, take note in your journal. What are you actively manifesting? Think about the past month. Where have you judged, gossiped, spoken negatively about others? What did you witness this was bad, shameful, unacceptable around your parents, sibling, friendships growing up? And then how can you connect this back to what you're manifesting and either use inner child or shadow to heal this wound right now and super speed your manifestation process?
Because it's just a mirror. That's all it is. The universe is like, listen, I want to connect you with this thing. Help me out here. I think that's fantastic. It's really great. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck. Thanks so much, Lacy. This is wonderful.
You too.
And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.